Sponsored by the Speaker of the Ninth House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, now President Tinubu's Chief of Staff, the Access to Higher Education Act 2023 has been in consideration in Nigeria's National Assembly since 2016, but it failed to gain traction. Reintroduced in 2019, it only gained the attention of the National Assembly in November 2022. The act outlines how the funds would be generated, saved, as well as administered. But while this has now become a law of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there are many concerns around the modality of repayment and the sustainability of the scheme. My guests tonight are Professor Emmanuel Osodeke. He's the president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU. I also have Dr. Adetunji Ogunyemi, Associate Professor of Economic History, and Olusesi Tolulope Samson, Chairman, National Association of Nigerian Students for Lagos State. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics HQ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Professor Osodeke, I'm going to start with you because in the past several days since this law has been signed, ASUU has quite reasonably made its concerns known, considering what the law entails. And I want to start from there. ASUU is not giving its full support to this law that was signed by President Tinubu. So let's start with the red flags that ASUU seems to see with the higher education law.
Well, thank you very much. Like I've always said, well, this issue is that, one, we have not seen the law. What we have seen at least in social media. But we need to see the law, review it as a union, and then we'll make our position known on this specific law that have just been signed by the president. Two, but on the issue of student loan and student bank worldwide and in Nigeria, ASUU is not in support. And our reasons are very clear. In other climes where they were being implemented, especially in the US, with a job, what do you call it? The employment rate of more than 30%, of employment rate less than 30%, less than 3%, I'm sorry. People who are taking the loan, the president of the country is paying back the loan on their behalf because of the hardship that is put on them. In Nigeria, it started in 1972, and it failed. In 1993, it failed. And the question we have asked is, if you have failed all these periods, what will make this one work? That's why we need to see the law. What is peculiar about this one that we ensure it doesn't follow the path of the one 1973, 1972, it did not follow the path of the one of 1993. What is the specialty in this? So as a union, we want to see a copy of the signed law, look at it, and then we will respond to the public. But as a union, we are completely not against the issue of student loan. Our idea is that if a government can put 15% of the budget to education, as all the countries around Nigerians are doing, you don't need to talk about student loan.
So I'll stay with you, Professor Osodeke, because ASUU, a representative of ASUU, is meant to be on the board that sits and works to administer this act, as you said. But until you see the signed law, you don't want to have a full-on response. But let's go by some of the things we've seen in social media that have to do with this act in terms of the establishments, where the funding is going to come from. Government has also often said in the past few years it does not have money to continue to fund education, to subsidize education to the manner in which it's being subsidized currently in Nigeria. And we know that this has been a bone of contention between the governments, regardless of the administration, and ASUU as well. So when you look at the fact that funding for this is meant to come from 1% of taxes, 1% of all profits from the federal government from oil and other minerals, 1% from taxes and levies and duties. It's also going to take donations, grants, gifts, endowments as well. If government can funnel that money towards this act, why can't government funnel that money towards funding education properly?
That's exactly the question we've asked. This money is coming from the government. It's not coming from the private sector, from our national wealth. Why punish the children of the poor by ensuring that when they are leaving school, they are only millions of naira, when there is no hope for job? Why don't we channel this money toward funding education, just like we also did with the government then in 1993, 1994, that resulted in TED Fund? If this money is channeled to such thing, it will take care of all the problems you have in the system. Bring our university to such a level that you can have lecturers from all over the world, you can have students from all over the world coming to our university. rather than people running away from the country. That's our own view. And we have been talking about it for over the past 7 years, that government should look at these areas and take money there and use it to fund education. Let me give a typical example. When Sanusi, the former emir of Kano, was the central bank governor, go around every federal university in this country, you put a project or two in every one of them. We mean there's some money there that could be used if we're honest. And they're all over all the people put them together. We're not talking about loan. Okay? We're not talking about loan. Loan for who? If the son of the man who earns less than 30,000 a month, how is he going to pay back? We know that in Nigeria, the unemployment rate is more than 30%. How would this person get a job and pay back? And they put a caveat that if you don't pay back, you go to jail. Which means we'll take a show sometime, the children of these poor people will be sent to jail. And that's why we are not in support. As a union, we are a union that is pro the poor, the ordinary Nigerian. That's our union. And that's why today, go to our campuses every year, we give out scholarship to students, indigenous students. Go around, you find out that as a union. Because that is where we should be looking at. Because if you allow the children to drop out of school, they will become a problem for the society.
Okay. Dr. Ogunyemi, I want to come to you now because the idea of student loans in Nigeria actually goes back a few decades. It goes back to 1972, and there was a bank established. There was also the military decree that set up a student loan board. But from different iterations of the idea, Nigeria has struggled to really make the concept take off. Now we're here with the Access to Higher Education Act 2023. Why has it been so difficult for Nigeria to successfully implement a student loan scheme and ensure to many points that those loans are actually paid back, and then there can be continuation and sustainability of this idea?
Two reasons accounted for Nigeria not being able to sustain a student loan scheme. The first was the rapacious influence of those who are just corrupt with the system. Those who are nepotistic with the administration of the loan, and it is only their friends, their lackeys, who are not qualified at all that will receive the loan. That was the first. The second reason is the reason of defaulters, those who took the loan and refused, failed, neglected to repay, denying other successive generations of qualified Nigerians from applying or even getting the loan in the first place. So these were the two reasons that are accounted for the demise of the student loan scheme. But let's come to think about it. There is no single way by which education can be funded in any country. You only have multiple ways, and the multivarious, or if you like, variegated ways of funding education in Nigeria is already in place. You have what they also worked for, the TED Fund, Tertiary Education Trust Fund is one of them. Government is also subsidizing education very heavily, because if you look at the issues with respect to the cost per undergraduate student in Nigeria's tertiary education, and we should not forget, this loan is only for tertiary education, polytechnics, universities. That's all. It is not for primary or secondary education, which is already been heavily subsidized, particularly in the southern part of the country. So it does not touch that. However, in the area of multifaceted approaches to this, to the funding of education, you have TED Fund in the higher education, you have the UBEC Fund, you have so many other interventions, to the extent that to educate, and some experts have computed it, to educate one undergraduate student in Nigerian university, for example, the cost in the humanities an amount not less than 350,000 naira. 350,000 naira. Now, check out just a sample of universities in Nigeria. At the Obafemi Awolowo University where I teach, the humanities, the students in the humanities, arts, education, law, etc., they pay 20,050 naira. You heard me. 20,050 naira, and they pay 3,000 naira for accommodation. Who does that? Where in the world do you get university education per session at 20,050 naira? And people or students in medical and engineering courses pay between 37,000 and 40,000 naira. That's the equivalent of that in any country that is doing proper education with respect to funding and the stocking of libraries and reagents in the laboratory is a minimum of £3,000. But in Nigeria, our students get it at $1,000. So it is not that government is not doing anything. Education, particularly higher education in Nigeria, is heavily subsidized. And this idea of student loan is one of the issues. And I think it should be accepted. It should be also welcomed.
Dr. Ogunyemi, I'll come back to you. I want to bring Mr. Samson into this. And Mr. Samson is the chairman of the National Association of Nigerian Students for the Lagos State chapter. When we look at this bill, it's not a bill anymore, when we look at this act on the face value, with what we've heard, but ASUU have said that they have yet to see the signed piece of legislation. But when Nigerian students look at this law on face value, what do you make of it? Is this just one other way in which we can get more students into tertiary education in Nigeria, or do you think it'll go the route of many of the other educational schemes that the country has seen?
All right, thank you very much. One thing I see about the law is that the criteria will be one of the disadvantages. Yes, the criteria will be one of the disadvantages. And to that, I think if there can be an amendment whereby the criteria are being reduced. It's okay, family earning less than 500,000 naira per year. So what if there's a family that earns 600,000 naira per year? That means they won't be able to have the loan. Yes. So I think concerning the loan itself, there will be a lot of defaulters. Yes, there would be a lot of defaulters concerning the loan. So I think a lot of people will be scared. Yes, because how can you say 2 years after NYSC? What is the assurance that the person, those that applied for the loan now we're giving, what is the assurance that they all will be employed? Yes, and you can see the rate of unemployment in our country is skyrocketing. Yes, so that itself has put a lot of fear in the heart of a lot of our incoming students. Most of them are scared. Yes, and even most of them cannot even get to and can't get any of the criteria. Yes, so what I'm seeing here and what we are trying to see on our own side here is that it might not let a lot of people want to go to school. Yes, because everybody already planned it. What is the assurance of getting a job?
Yeah.
That's that.
So, Mr. Samson, hold on. Let's go deeper into these criteria. And I would love to hear from Professor Osodeke on this in particular. It's a list, so please just bear with me. So this criteria for accessing the loan, it consists mainly of the submission of an application letter, as well as a copy of your admission letter and 2 guarantor letters. It's only open to students of government-owned tertiary institutions, which means public universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, and vocational schools that have been established by the government. Applicants' income, as we referenced here, it should be less than 500,000 per annum. The guarantors must either be a civil servant of at least level 12, a lawyer with at least 10 years post-call experience, or a judicial officer, or even a justice of the peace. Now, there's disqualification. So students can be disqualified from taking the loan if they have been found guilty of exam malpractice by any school authority or convicted of a felony or any offense involving dishonesty or fraud. You can also be disqualified if your parents have defaulted in respect of a student loan or any loan granted to the person or have been convicted of drug offenses. So, Prof, when we look at these requirements and we look at the fact that there are over 1 million students in tertiary institutions across Nigeria, how easy do you think it would be for many Nigerian students to qualify for this loan? Okay, I think we've lost connection to Professor Osodeke, but hopefully he'll be back with us. Dr. Ogunyemi, you heard the list of requirements, and you've heard from Mr. Samson as well, who says that some of these requirements look to be the things that could be scaring off many students and families from even attempting to get this loan. What do you think of these requirements?
Good. Thank you. The requirements are contained in Section 14 of that Act. And for those who have not gotten copies of this, it is possible for you to access the copies from the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, which is an arm of the National Assembly. It is possible. You don't have to wait for the law to be gazetted, because it will take about another 30 days to be able to get the law gazetted. Now, having said that, let me say that this loan and this fund scheme is highly welcome. It is not compulsory that a student applies for it. I mean, if you cannot fulfill the eligibility criteria, Section 14, you need not apply for it. It is not a dash. It is not a bursary. It is not a free-for-all. It is not a loan. It's not a kind of fund you take to go and buy phone. You don't go and buy data with it. It is only to pay your school fees. And with respect to school fees, it means tuition alone. It is not inclusive of the money for feeding. It's not inclusive of the money for buying books. It's only for tuition. So the legitimate criteria that are stated there are doable to those who are honest, those who honestly are indigent. In other words, those whose income or the income of their family is less than 42,000 naira in a month. If the income of your family is less than 42,000, you can take it. But if it is up to 32,000 or more than that, you are not indigent. It's only for indigent students. Those who can absolutely not afford to pay. Even if you say the school fee is 50,000 naira, they can't pay it. If you say 20,000 naira, they can't pay it. It does not matter wherever that Nigerian is. It is only for indigent students. So it is not a free for all. So there is no need to be afraid. It is only those who are intending not to repay that can be afraid. At any rate, I think the learned Professor Osodeke actually said that people can go to jail for it. I have studied the law. I'm a legal practitioner. I've studied the law from section 1 to the last section. There is no single provision for jail term for defaulter. The only thing is that the bank, that is the CBN, in which the loan is domiciled, shall proceed against the guarantors, the two civil servants guarantor at level 12, who, for example, cannot ensure that the grantee pays back the loan. So they proceed against their salary to take it gradually until it is finally amortized. That's the provision in the law. It's not the provision in anybody. With due respect.
Okay, so Dr. Ogunyemi, I want to stay with you. Do you think that ASUU's, I guess I would say red flags, because that was the word I used earlier with Professor Osodeke. Do you think that ASUU's red flags are red flags that must stop the implementation of this act? I asked that to say that in terms of, as you said, it only covers tuition, but there are those who have said that this is commercialization of public education, and that in fact it's anti-poor because it doesn't widen the door. It doesn't in fact widen access. As you stress now, it's only for those who fall under 500,000 naira per annum as household income. So would this be something that we're just hearing too much noise about and red flags that are not necessary, because meet the criteria, get the loan, and as you said earlier, there's more than one way to fund education. So is ASUU making too much about nothing?
Of course, you are right about the administered act. It's absolutely unnecessary. It's just one of the ways to cure the deficiency in our system. And it is only in respect of the very, very poor, the really poor. Just imagine someone who's income for 42,000 naira. How much is 42,000 naira for God's sake? I mean, and that is the category of Nigerians that are qualified. Surely it cannot be the children of lecturers. No, those students, no child of a lecturer will fall in that category. No child of anyone who is a teacher in a secondary school in any part of Nigeria will be qualified for that kind of thing, because the income of his parents, just one of the parents, is greater than 500,000 naira in a year. How about that? It is only for the poor of the poor, what I can call the wretched of the earth. So there is no need for this protestation against the law. People may protest with respect to saying, okay, it discriminates against some Nigerians, but that is not true. Which Nigeria is it discriminating against? You find the poor virtually in every part of Nigeria. There is no discrimination in that law in any way whatsoever. The only thing I may find objectionable is the number of professional or trade union bodies that are put in the board of the students' loan. I mean, what is the Nigerian Bar Association doing there? Is there any justification for the Nigerian Bar Association there? I mean, you can expunge That kind of an association is absolutely necessary. You don't begin to create more salary earners and allowance takers in a loan that is supposedly made for indigent students. So I think this loan should be welcome. The poor cannot complain about this loan, surely.
All right, Dr. Ogunyemi, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll look further into the board, as you've mentioned as well, then also some of the requirements and conversations around the funding aspect of this. So that's a part of the conversation, and hopefully my other two guests will also be joining me for that. So Dr. Ogunyemi, please hold the line. You're watching Politics HQ, and we're looking at Nigeria's Access to Higher Education Act 2023, otherwise known as the Student Loan Law. More on that when we come back. This is Politics HQ, and under the spotlight tonight is the recently signed Access to Higher Education Act 2023, also known as the Student Loan Act. Now, my guest, earlier we spoke to Professor Emmanuel Osodeke. He was the president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU. I also have Dr. Adetunji Ogunyemi, associate professor of economic history, and hopefully Olusesi Tolulope Samson, who's the chairman of the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, Lagos State, will be able to join me back. So, Dr. Ogunyemi, I want us to look at this in terms of history, because unfortunately, if history is anything to go by, the issues of corruption that Nigeria faces, the chances of success of this scheme could be questionable and could also lend a lot of credence to what ASUU is concerned about. So when we look at this in terms of the potential for unfortunate corruption to rear its head, because people are concerned that the loans may not go to the indigent students, may not go to the families that make less than 500,000 naira per annum. So there's a lot of trust deficits, which extends to many things in Nigeria's situation. How do you think we can tighten the structure around this loan to make sure that it is those who need it the most who get the help that it offers?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. The law already has what we can call the built-in mechanism to prevent defaulters from destroying the original intention of the loan of the government, which is contained in Section 4, Section 6, and Section 4 of that law. The intent of the government is to reach the not yet reached with respect to their lowest income earner in Nigeria. That is the utterly indigent Nigerian, but who has first the admission, who must have first been admitted. It is not a loan to be applied by those who are writing down. If your intention is to go and write down, it is not for you. You must first of all have secured admission. And then you must have been recommended by your Students' Affairs Office through the Office of the Vice Chancellor in the case of a university, or the Office of the Provost in the case of a polytechnic or college of education. So the built-in mechanism to prevent defaulters is contained in Section 14 and Section 15 of the law. And what are these mechanisms? One, you bring two guarantors. These guarantors must be public servants working in the establishment of either a state or a federal government. Level 12. These are people who can actually pay back in the case of the grantee defaulting on the loan. They can pay back. And the amortization of this loan, the gradual retirement of this loan, can be levied upon them in the course of the year. 2 years after graduation or after NYSC, as it is stated in that law. So, and if it is a justice of the peace or a judicial officer, the same thing applies. The intent of government, really, which can be read from the first section of that law, is to reach every Nigerian without any discrimination. Because quota system does not apply to this loan. There cannot be any argument to say, oh, why are you taking 600 people from southern Nigeria and only 2 people from northern Nigeria? There's no such argument in this law. It is for every Nigerian. And the built-in mechanism is that he who guarantees will pay back in the event of defaulting. And I think that is good. That is perfectly in order.
Okay, so I'll come back to you, but I would like to hear from Mr. Samson on the repayments, because this is saying 2 years post-NYSC. And as you mentioned earlier, we know where things stand with Nigeria's employment and labor markets. In unemployment at over 30-something%, estimated to probably reach about 40% by the end of this year. There's unemployment, there's underemployment. Is 2 years too short to expect that anybody who takes this loan, who comes from a family, as poor as many of the families that meet the criteria will likely be, will be able to pay back this loan? Is 2 years too short of a time? Mr. Samson.
I can say when anyone that takes the loan is being able to get a job, secured an employment, I think the 2 years is not short. Yes. But for the issue of, because of the unemployment rate, I think the 2 years is very, very short. Yes. I know, according to one of our national presidents says something, he spoke to all JCC chairmen in Nigeria and told us that he wants us to have a sensitization program. Yes, the student loan sensitization program, whereby we need to bring professors to let the students know what they want to get. Yes, because the student might think he just wants to go and get the loan. We want the student to know more about the loan, because a lot of students are happy. They are joyous. They are going up and down saying there's loan, there's loan. Do they know what is after the loan? Yes. So, this time, I want you to know we are coming with a sensitization program that will enhance the knowledge of all Nigerian students about the student loan.
Okay, so Dr. Ogunyemi, the same question to you. When we look at the realities on ground for graduates in Nigeria, we have that conversation about how many students were graduating into the labor markets, and in the long run, how many students the labor market is actually able to absorb. Is 2 years too short of a time, too short of a turnaround time to expect that those who take the loan, who come from these very difficult circumstances, would have been in a position to be able to start repaying the loan?
I think that's the sticky one.
Mr. Samson, hold on. Let Dr. Ogunyemi answer.
That's the sticky one there. I think the period of repayment post-NYC should actually be that period, which is equal to the total number of years, the minimum number of years for which that student had studied in the university or colleges of education. So, for example, if the student studied for 5 years law in the university, then the repayment period should be for 5 years, and that should be post-NYC. And this is an opportunity for philanthropists in Nigeria to come into the mix, and then help pay up or pay off the loan taken by the indigent students. In fact, an opportunity for philanthropists in Nigeria is now open by this law. That is, philanthropists who are convinced that there is no way an indigent student can pay back within a period of 2 or 4 years, as I have suggested here, can come into the mix to pay on their behalf. There is nothing wrong in that. In fact, that would be a most pointed way by which philanthropy can be executed in Nigeria. Yes, I agree that 2 years is rather short, but it does not stop the fact that the students don't have to be, or the graduates who are taking that loan don't have to be in paid employment. They can be self-employed. What if it's self-employed and enhance more than millions after that? How about that? So this will actually ginger people into actually pursuing works or jobs that are outside of the public service. There's hardly no work in the public service any longer. Unemployment rate in Nigeria is 32.3%, and inflation is far in excess of 22%. In fact, 22.4%. So we can also extrapolate to say that the possibility of a student or a graduate amortizing the loan granted him within 2 years after NYSC, that possibility is less than half. So I think the law should be amended after some operation to allow the repayment period to be not less than 4 years.
Not less than 4 years. All right, you raised the point of those who would sit on the board. So this loan scheme, the funds for it will be domiciled in the CBN. There's an 11-person special committee that will be chaired by the CBN governor. So let's look at who else is going to sit on that committee. Then there will be a secretary appointed by the chairperson, and members of the committee include the ministers responsible for education and finance or their representatives, and the Auditor General of the Federation. There's also the chairman of the National Universities Commission, a representative of the Forum of University Vice Chancellors, a representative of the Forum of the Polytechnic Rectors, and a Forum of Provosts of all colleges of education in the country. There's also meant to be a representative of the Nigeria Labour Congress, a representative of the Nigerian Bar Association, and a representative of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. And it is this committee that will then decide the broad modalities, including the process of application that we've already heard so far about, as well as qualifications and more. So when you look at this committee, 11 persons sitting on it, NBA, NLC, ASUU as well, what do you make of the composition of this committee, Dr. Ogunyemi?
I think the composition is unwieldy, far unwieldy. And of course, I cannot see any justification for the Nigerian Bar Association sitting in that committee, or the Academic Staff Union of Universities, or the Nigerian Labour Congress. What are they doing on the board? For what? I mean, the loan is not for them, it is for students. In fact, you can increase the representation of students there by saying at least 2 should come from the National Association of Nigerian Students. But to begin to put labor unions and overrepresent the Nigerian Bar Association in all government boards and parastatals, I think it's part of our over-governance, excess governance. In fact, people on that board should not exceed 7, but they must certainly include the Auditor General of the Federation, the CBN, and of course the Accountant General of the Federation. Okay. These are the components that I think should be there. Certainly not ASUU, and not the Nigerian Labour Union or the Nigerian Bar Association.
But I have to ask, why not ASUU, and why even not the National Universities Commission? They oversee education in Nigeria. ASUU, of course, has its members teaching and being part of university and tertiary education across the country. Why are you sort of saying no to their input on this?
I'm not against the National University Commission being a part, such as not against the colleges of education, apex regulatory body. But ASUU, a trade union, in that kind of an organization, you would like to ask for what? Whose interest represented there? Is it interest of the auditor? I mean, whose interest? Absolutely, I mean, it will be one representation too many there. What? Is that an employers consultative assembly? A Nigerian Bar Association? For what? I mean, the Auditor General of the Federation, who will guarantee or ensure accountability and transparency there. So why should the Nigerian Bar Association be there? I mean, if there should be any legal issue, the central bank can seek for advice from its own legal department with respect to the granting of loans. I think we should not be creating jobs for the boys in a very serious issue concerning the indigency of our citizenry. We are talking of indigent people. We're not talking of people who can afford 50,000 naira phone. Any student who can afford 50,000 naira phone is not qualified for this loan.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mr. Samson, let me come to you now. Earlier you said, of course, that students are quite happy to hear about the loan, but when you look at the requirements, it might actually cancel out a lot of Nigerian students. So there are over 1 million students, some say around 1.8 million students that are registered in tertiary institutions across Nigeria. How much impact do you think this loan will have with the requirements, particularly less than 500,000 naira per annum for the families who may want their children to apply for the loan? What kind of impact do you think this law can have?
I think it will strengthen the hope of a student academically. Yes, and one of the impacts to me, if the necessary things are being done or necessary amendments are being made, as like my professors have said, I think if the necessary amendments were being made, I think it's just going to make things very easy. Yes, it will have a lot of impact, and I want you to know a lot of students would want to go to school. A lot of students would want to be of good conduct. Yes, because you know when you are caught from exam malpractice, you are out of it. When you are being arrested for fraud, you are out of it. So I want you to know this. Another impact is a lot of students will begin to build good morals. A lot of students would start building morals for it himself, because he knows that he must not be found in any of those things that were highlighted, or else you won't have access to the loan. So another impact is going to make it like it's going to make a student be of good conduct in school.
All right, I'll take that. Dr. Ogunyemi, I'm back to you now, because while looking into this, interestingly enough, there are those who believe that it shouldn't be just public government-funded institutions that are able to access this loan. there's actually been a call from a small quarter of people who believe that private universities should also be included in this loan as well. Many people think that those who send their children to private universities have all the money in the world, but I can honestly tell you there are those who also take loans, whether it's from the banks or cooperatives, to be able to send their children to private universities or tertiary institutions because of the issues that public institutions have. What do you make of this call that it should also, this loan should also include private universities?
It is very laughable. I almost wanted to say it is regrettable that anyone is making a protestation or a case for any private university to benefit from this. There is no single private university in Nigeria that is for indigent students. And for private entrepreneurs who went into establishing universities, they already have counted, they must have counted their costs. So this is for the indigent student. No indigent student can be in any private university. In fact, on that score, going by section 14, section 15 of this law, they are disqualified. There is no private university in any part of this country that the school fees of the students is less than $500,000. So if you can pay $500,000, how dare you say that you are indigent? You are not qualified.
Let's go back to the issue of funding. So funding of education continues to be a major controversy. As I was asking Professor Osodeke earlier, government has said they cannot continue funding education the way it's been. And you've raised the issues using even your own university as an example as to the price, or rather the cost that the students pay there. Now, for this act, funds will come from 1% of all profits accruing to the federal government from oil and other minerals, 1% of taxes, levies, and duties accruing to the federal government from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the Nigerian Immigration Service, and the Nigerian Customs Service, as well as education bonds and endowment fund schemes. It will also be funded through donations, gifts, grants, endowment, and revenue accruing to the fund from its other sources. As I asked the ASUU president earlier, I'm still going to put it to you as well. If these can fund the act, why can't we channel them, or why shouldn't we be channeling them to fund education properly without turning it into a loan scheme? Because one of the things ASUU has said is don't make this a loan, make it a grant. Don't put that additional pressure on students to have to repay. So is this really the best way to ensure some kind of return on government's investment in education? What do you think?
See, we need to be a little charitable when talking about the cost of education, particularly higher education in Nigeria, and what government is doing about it. We need to be charitable a little. There is no single student in any public institution in Nigeria that the government, either of the state or of the federal government, is not already paying more than 300,000 naira in subsidy over per student, per undergraduate student. Postgraduate student, I cannot say much. But undergraduate student, the federal government, the state government is already paying more than 300,000 naira per student. Because those who know the Academic Staff Union of Universities, National University Commission, they set up the needs assessment committee, and they brought out a report. And one of the reports, in one of the sections of the report, is that how much does it cost to educate a student in the humanities, for example, just one student? The report was 350,000 naira per student. So in all the universities where you are paying less than 350,000 naira, government is subsidizing your education to the tune of the remainder of what you are paying. So in Ife, for example, Obafemi Awolowo University, where I teach, the students in humanities pay 20,000 naira and 50 naira, 20,000 and 50 naira. Government is subsidizing them to the tune of about 320,000 naira already. So there cannot be any explanation to say that all the cost of education should be borne by government. No. There is nowhere in the world, except in the socialist countries, and we have seen the examples of socialist countries collapsing in their utopia, that parents and students will not contribute at least something to the education of their own people. You must do something. And the time has come for us to be more realistic. One, Nigeria's revenues do not accrue as much as they do before, even in value. Second, we have the burgeoning and explosion of students in terms of number in our colleges, polytechnics, and universities. And third is the issue that has to do that with other competing demands of government: electricity, roads, security, etc., etc. So if government is permitting some kind of fund to go to the indigent and some other funds for the general. And I think we should be charitable to acknowledge that and not to become too antagonistic of public policies.
So I'll follow this up with my final question, because you want to get more Nigerian students into higher education, increase the opportunities, increase the educated number of students who graduate into the labor market. So it looks like a pyramid, or it looks like some kind of pile that you must then build upon. You must have a labor market that's ready to absorb these students so that they are able to pay back. But beyond that, you have a labor market that turns them into productive citizens. So, Dr. Ogunyemi, this seems to be one brick in this new structure, or a brick in a pyramid that the government is trying to, of course, build upon. If you were to build upon the loan scheme or the loan act as it's coming out, what's next when you look at the wider economic realities, the wider labor market realities of Nigeria? How do you build upon it so that you have a labor market that's also ready to take these students in? Maybe not all, but at least primary. Or you have a labor market that's ready to turn them into entrepreneurs so they themselves also become employers of labor.
In the short run, government must do something about industrial production. That's actually the key. That's the key to getting the mass of our students, the mass of our graduates employed. And where is industrial production in Nigeria? Practically zero, practically none. Now, how about Ajakuta Steel Project? Do something about it. The newsprint and newspaper production company in Okuiboku, do something about it. The Osogbo machine tools that has gone moribund in the last 30 years, do something about it. The Alaja Steel Complex, do something about it. The aluminum smelter company at Ikorapene, do something about it. The Nigerian liquefied natural gas. Look, we had all these companies before. Do you know at a point in Nigeria in the 1970s and 80s, Nigerian leaders only drove cars assembled in Nigeria? Peugeot Automobile, the 504 GL was the highest quality of car that the president of Nigeria drove in this country. Now, Leyland was doing its vehicle automobile assembly business in Ibadan, and Namco in Anambra area. Steya, was assembling tractors in Bauchi. The Volkswagen B2 was being assembled in Ojo. They are in Lagos State, close to the Lagos State University. That was the assembly plant for Volkswagen of Nigeria. Where are they today? See, there is no way we can generate huge employment opportunities for our people except we go industrial. If you go to do agricultural, you will not get it. Except you go agro-allied. Except there is a link between industrial demand for products and the employment market, that is the labor and the skill we are developing for our people. Except there is that link, that synergy, we are not going to succeed in the area of employment and job production or job provision for our people. I think we should go industrial. Nigeria is too less industrial to get optimum employment. What we need to do is to do industrial, manufacturing, in agriculture, in transportation, issues that has to do with mining, and solid minerals. Except we do that, I tell you, we will be living, I don't want to say that, we will not be realistic with ourselves.
Okay, we'll leave the conversation at that. So I like the word you used, which was synergy. And it's very important because if we're increasing those who are going into tertiary institutions across Nigeria and expecting them to graduate and take on these loans, we should also expect that there are going to be greater demands on the labor market, and there are going to be greater demands of these people when they come out as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Ogunyemi. Thank you so much, Mr. Samson, for joining me this evening as we look at the Access to Higher Education Act in Nigeria. And that's as much as we can take tonight on Politics HQ. My guest tonight, who joined me earlier, Professor Emmanuel Osodeke. He's the president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities. We also had Dr. Adetunji Ogunyemi, associate professor of economic history, and Olusesi Tolulope Samson, chairman of the National Association of Nigerian Students here in Lagos State. There is, of course, more on this act that's going to be coming up. A lot of people have raised some flack. ASUU says they're not completely behind it, and they would like a few amendments to make it more palatable. And there are other organizations who say that this is just the commercialization of public education in Nigeria. But of course, the conversations will always continue as we put Nigerian politics front and center right here on Politics HQ. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm Tolulope. Adeleru-Balogun. Do have a pleasant evening.